Can you picture standing in your almost in-law's living room on Christmas Day, covered in grime from working on your pride and joy, only to be told by the woman you're supposed to marry that she'll forget you in a week? The kicker? I'd already been plotting my exit for 2 whole months. The festive cheer in Brooke's parents' home that Christmas was a thin, fragile veneer, ready to shatter. I remember the glint of fairy lights reflecting off the grease on my hands, a stark contrast to the perfect, manufactured holiday scene and the cold, hard accusation in her eyes. What Brooke didn't realize as she hurled those insults that night was that each word was simply digging her own hole deeper, because I had an entire archive of receipts, ready and waiting. So, my name's Caleb. I'm 32. I spend my days fixing monstrous heavy machinery. I box 3 times a week, and my passion? My 1973 Dodge Challenger. I've been meticulously restoring that beauty since I was 25, and believe me, that car was about to become my unlikely savior in ways I never could have predicted. Brooke and we'd been together for 3 intense years, engaged for 8 months. If you'd asked me even 2 years ago, I would have told you, without a shadow of a doubt, she was the one. Back then, she was vibrant, genuinely funny, ambitious, and she made me want to be a better man. My mom adored her, my closest friends gave their stamp of approval, and I honestly thought we were building a rock-solid future. But then, slowly, subtly, between picking out wedding invitations and poring over vendor contracts, she started morphing. She became someone I barely recognized, and watching that painful transformation unfold over 6 months, it hurt more than I ever cared to admit. We'd agreed, explicitly, to split all wedding costs right down the middle, 50-50ths. It felt completely fair. We both worked full-time, after all. But without fail, every single invoice, the venue deposit, catering, the photographer's retainer, somehow always landed on my credit card. Brooke never had the funds available, despite her decent income as a marketing coordinator. She lived like she was pulling in double her actual salary. Immaculate nails, a constant rotation of new clothes, those trendy weekend brunches where avocado toast costs $18. But when it came to her share of our shared wedding expenses, suddenly, she was utterly broke. "Could you just cover it, honey? I'll pay you back next month." But next month was a phantom. It never arrived. And if I dared to even mention it, she'd twist it around, launching a full-blown assault on my character. "You're so cheap, Caleb. If you loved me, you wouldn't be counting pennies." After months of that emotional gymnastics, I genuinely started to feel like I was losing my mind, second-guessing myself, wondering if I was the actual problem. Thank God for Sam. My best friend since high school, Sam has this bizarre habit of documenting everything, like he's prepping for the apocalypse. After I grumbled to him for the 3rd time about Brooke dodging a payment, he quietly started keeping his own meticulous records. By November, his calculations showed I'd covered a staggering $11,000 in wedding expenses that were meant to be joint. And that was on top of still paying 2/3 of our dates. Sam doesn't just screenshot. He saves email chains, photographs every receipt, and organizes it all into color-coded folders. I used to tease him about being paranoid, but little did I know that eccentric habit was about to become the single most important thing saving my future. The red flags weren't just waving anymore, they were practically blinding me by October. Brooke suddenly got incredibly secretive with her phone, always angling the screen away, taking hushed calls in the other room. After 3 years together, you know when someone's behavior shifts, and this was a seismic change. I brought it up to Sam over a couple of beers, and he, in his usual calm, strategic way, suggested I start keeping my own comprehensive records, every expense, every single conversation about money, every promise she made. "Just in case things go sideways, buddy," he'd said. So, for 8 solid weeks leading up to Christmas, that's exactly what I did. I documented everything, all while trying to maintain a perfectly normal facade. The Christmas dinner invitation arrived mid-December, with Brooke insisting I had to be there. Her mom, apparently, wanted to discuss wedding details. "Sure," I said, playing along. I finished an early shift, spent 2 blissful hours replacing the Challenger's shot front suspension, cleaned up, and headed to her parents' place around 3. The second I stepped through the door, a chill ran down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. The house itself was a picture of holiday perfection, an expensive tree with perfectly matched ornaments, mulled wine simmering on the stove, carols playing softly, presents stacked high. But the people? They were ice cold. Her mom barely met my gaze. Her dad offered a strange, tight smile. Her sister, Chloe, was nervously fidgeting with her phone. And Brooke herself? Glued to her screen, a subtle, almost predatory smirk playing on her lips, typing away like she was live-tweeting her own damn ambush. We sat down for dinner, and for what felt like an agonizing 20 minutes, everything was aggressively normal. Dishes were passed, polite small talk about holiday shopping, her dad even asked about my work. But underneath it all, the tension was a living, breathing thing, building. Then Chloe, bless her heart, or maybe curse it, innocently mentioned honeymoon destinations. And in an instant, Brooke's entire demeanor snapped into full-blown attack mode. She launched into this venomous monologue about how I wasn't pulling my weight financially, how I cared more about that stupid car than our future, how she was sick and tired of being with someone without ambition who spent every free hour in a garage covered in motor oil. Her family? They just sat there, nodding in eerie unison, like they'd all been thoroughly briefed, like I was the sole unwitting participant in a play where everyone else knew their precise lines. Then, with a dramatic flourish, Brooke stood up, raised her wine glass as if making a celebratory toast. She declared she was done with a man who had no drive, that she didn't need someone who lived in a garage. And then, she dropped the absolute bombshell. There were men out there, she said, who actually knew what they wanted from life. Men like Mark. Chloe's face went stark white. Her dad's fork clattered to his plate with a shocking sound. Her mom just stared blankly into her wine. In that moment, a cold certainty washed over me. Her mom had known. But Chloe and her dad? They were hearing about the affair for the very first time, just like me. The betrayal rippled through the room. But Brooke wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She yanked off the engagement ring, the one I'd worked 2 months of overtime for, and hurled it at me. It bounced off my chest with a brutal force, then hit the hardwood floor, echoing with a pathetic, metallic ping. "It's cheap," she sneered, "just like everything you do." Then she delivered what she clearly thought was the ultimate, crushing blow. She locked eyes with me, a cruel smirk on her face, and hissed, "I'll forget you in a week." "I've practically already forgotten you, Caleb." On Christmas Day, in front of her entire family. She had just utterly nuked our 3-year relationship, not just by ending it, but by announcing she'd been cheating with some guy named Mark. The wildest part? I'd suspected something for months, a gut feeling I couldn't shake, but I hadn't known for certain until that precise, devastating moment. I stood up slowly, the silence in the room deafening. For about 5 seconds, a white-hot rage pulsed through my veins. But then an almost eerie calm washed over me. Because she'd just done it. Exactly what Sam and I had half expected. She'd gone full nuclear, in front of witnesses, and, in doing so, handed me every single thing I needed. I calmly bent down, retrieved the abandoned ring, then reached into my pocket. I pulled out the spare key to my apartment, the one she still carried, and placed it deliberately on the table. I met her dad's bewildered gaze. "Thank you for having me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And I'm truly sorry it had to end this way." Then I turned and walked out. I didn't listen to Brooke's sudden, shrill yelling. I just kept walking. I sat in my truck for a mere 10 seconds, just long enough to send a quick text to Sam. It happened. She went full nuclear. Starting protocol now. Then, I drove straight to his place, my phone already exploding with texts from Brooke, morphing from angry, to confused, to utterly panicked in the span of 15 minutes. Sam opened his door, took one look at my face, and without a word, just said, "She actually did it, didn't she?" I nodded, a grim confirmation. He immediately grabbed his laptop. We both knew exactly what came next. See, I'd spent 8 grueling weeks preparing for this exact moment. Not because I wanted our relationship to shatter, but because I'd finally started seeing the insidious patterns, the financial manipulation, the emotional gaslighting. Sam had helped me meticulously document it all. Every time I tried to discuss our lopsided expenses, she'd turn it around, launching a personal attack. After months of that, I genuinely felt like I was losing my grip on reality. But Sam had been my anchor, insisting I save absolutely everything. Screenshots, bank statements, emails, even voice memos. Just in case things implode, Caleb, he'd warned, you'll need proof you're not insane. That night, sitting in Sam's apartment, watching him pull up those folders, all filled with meticulously organized, damning evidence, I felt this utterly strange, profound calm. For the first time in months, I wasn't confused. I wasn't second-guessing my sanity. The entire toxic pattern was laid out before me in stark black and white. And finally, I knew precisely what needed to happen next. The morning after Christmas, I woke up on Sam's couch. My phone was a hot mess, 23 missed calls from Brooke, and nearly 50 texts that had started apologetic around midnight, morphed into accusatory by 3 a.m., and devolved into completely incoherent rambling by dawn. The very first thing I did? Changed every single lock on my apartment. She'd had that spare key for 6 months. Sam was already up, sitting at his kitchen table, his laptop open, 3 colored highlighters lined up like surgical instruments. He looked up, a grim satisfaction on his face. We have everything, he stated. Everything we need to dismantle her entire narrative. The plan was brutal in its simplicity, yet incredibly thorough. Step 1. Block Brooke everywhere. Step 2. Update all my emergency contacts at work and with insurance to remove her entirely. Step 3. Initiate a systematic, calculated cancellation of all wedding vendors. And most critically, Step 4. Conduct a full, forensic financial audit of every single dollar I'd spent that was supposed to be split 50/50ths. Sam, true to form, had already built this intricate spreadsheet, meticulously breaking down every wedding expense by vendor, date, amount, and precisely who was contractually obligated to pay what. Seeing 3 years of financial imbalance laid out in black and white was genuinely shocking. Because I'd been paying in scattered chunks, I hadn't fully registered just how devastatingly lopsided it had become. The venue deposit alone? $4,500, entirely from my account. Catering was $3,200. The photographer, $1,500. Plus probably 15 smaller expenses, all adding up way past my fair share. I started making those calls that very afternoon. And here's a little secret most people don't know. Many wedding vendors actually have pretty reasonable cancellation policies if you're outside certain time windows. Since our wedding wasn't until early June, and this was still December, I was squarely in the refund zone. The venue gave back $3,000 of the $4,500. The caterer refunded $2,400 of the $3,200. The photographer, as per contract, kept his retainer. All told, I recovered about $4,350. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Then, 2 weeks after Christmas, just when I thought the agonizing refund process was finally winding down, the venue coordinator called. Her voice sounded incredibly uncomfortable. Apparently, Brooke had contacted them, alleging that I'd stolen her identity to cancel, claiming she never agreed to it. They'd frozen my refund pending an investigation. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, processing the sheer audacity. She was actively, maliciously sabotaging my ability to recover money I had paid. That's when it hit me with chilling clarity. This wasn't going to be a clean break. This was war. Pure and simple. Sam showed up within 20 minutes. We spent 3 intense hours meticulously documenting every payment that came from my accounts, complete with my signatures and emails proving I'd been the sole communicator with them. The next morning, we drove to the venue, calmly walked them through our irrefutable evidence, and they unfroze the refund within the hour. But that whole manipulative stunt? It showed me one terrifying truth. Brooke wasn't moving on. She was burning everything down on her way out. And she didn't care who got scorched. The engagement ring was a trickier beast. You can't exactly return custom jewelry. But I'd worked with David, the jeweler, years back, and he, being a stand-up guy, bought it back for me at 60% of its value, putting another welcome chunk of change back in my pocket. As Sam and I continued to dissect our shared expenses with forensic detail, we uncovered that Brooke had racked up a staggering $1,247 in charges that were supposed to be joint, where she'd committed to paying half, but never, ever did. The engagement party, where she insisted on expensive wine. A venue tour weekend, where she unilaterally upgraded our hotel without even consulting me. And countless other instances where she'd make costly decisions, then conveniently develop amnesia about reimbursing me. Sam suggested small claims court. I hesitated, honestly. A huge part of me just wanted to be done with the entire nightmare. But then I remembered her venomous attempt to block my venue refund, and I knew she wouldn't let this end quietly. So, we built what Sam, with a grin, called the Evidence Bible. Bank statements, text screenshots filled with her broken promises to repay, ignored Venmo requests, detailed expense breakdowns, all meticulously organized with tabs, and even a table of contents. It was probably overkill, but we weren't taking any chances. The filing fee was a paltry $35. Court date? Early March. Meanwhile, Brooke's behavior escalated from merely annoying to genuinely disturbing. Her apologetic Christmas texts vanished by the 27th, abruptly replaced by furious accusations that I'd humiliated her. By New Year's, she was barraging me with lengthy, desperate messages about how I'd ruined her life. Her family was disappointed, her sister Chloe wouldn't talk to her, and somehow, all of this was my fault for not fighting for our relationship after she had announced her affair. She started calling from different numbers after I blocked her. She showed up at my gym twice before the staff banned her. She drove past my apartment so frequently my neighbor mentioned seeing her car. She even tried to get into my workplace, claiming she needed to drop something off. I documented everything: screenshots, call logs, precise dates and times of her appearances, witness statements. After the 5th incident, I called the police non-emergency line, inquiring about creating an official harassment record. The officer was incredibly helpful, confirming my documentation was solid, and assured me that if her behavior escalated, I'd have more than enough for a protective order. Mid-January, Sam showed up with something big. Something huge. Using his uncanny knack for social media forensics, he uncovered a bombshell. Brooke's affair wasn't recent at all. It had been going on for 8 months. Basically, ever since we got engaged back in April. Worse, Sam found statements showing hotel rooms and weekend trips she'd claimed were work conferences or girls' weekends, all charged directly to our joint wedding expense account. She'd been systematically funding her affair, her secret life, with money that was meant to build our future. When Sam showed me those highlighted charges, a wave of nausea washed over me. I felt physically sick. There was Napa in May, conveniently labeled a marketing conference. A beach hotel in August, supposedly a bachelorette party. A downtown hotel in September, which she'd sworn was for a late client dinner. All of it on our wedding card. I sat there, staring blankly at those charges, and that was the closest I came to completely losing my composure. The financial manipulation? That was one thing. But this? This felt like a calculated, utterly cold-blooded betrayal on an entirely different, horrific level. Sam asked if I was okay. I couldn't even form words for a full minute. I just stared. Then I retreated to my garage and spent 4 hours, head down, methodically replacing the Challenger's brake lines. I needed something with clear steps, something with measurable progress, something tangible I could fix. By midnight, I was back to that familiar, cold, focused calm. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. No. Now, I was going to ensure there was a complete accounting. For everything. Mark turned out to be a mid-level sales manager. Married. 2 kids. Absolutely zero intention of ever leaving his wife, despite whatever grand promises he'd spun for Brooke. Sam even found Mark's wife's public Facebook profile, showing a perfectly normal suburban family, soccer games, birthday parties, happy holidays. And from Brooke's own increasingly unhinged social media posts, it was crystal clear she was just now realizing that Mark had used her and was never, ever leaving his marriage. She had blown up her entire life for a guy who had been lying to her the whole damn time. And watching that agonizing realization dawn on her, expressed through furious, bitter posts about all men being trash. I have to admit, it was almost satisfying. In a really dark, vindictive way. Around this time, something unexpected happened. My relationship with Natalie shifted gently into something more. She'd worked at Mike's Auto Parts for years. We'd chatted casually dozens of times, just friendly shop talk. Then, one day, I went in for seat brackets, and she happened to mention she was restoring a 1969 Camaro SS. We ended up talking for 45 minutes straight about suspension geometry and brake conversions. And in that moment, I realized this was the first genuinely relaxed conversation I'd had in months. I wasn't calculating who owed what or wondering if I was being manipulated. It was easy. We grabbed coffee, and I, in a torrent of pent-up emotion, talked for another 45 minutes straight about vendor contracts and court preparations. I probably killed any chance of a second meetup right then and there. But Natalie just listened, calm and steady. She told me she'd been through her own brutally messy breakup where her ex tried claiming he'd paid for things she'd actually paid for, so she completely understood. She was straightforward, incredibly calm, knew her stuff, and insisted on paying for her own coffee. Being around her felt like the absolute antithesis of Brooke's exhausting, never-ending chaos. We started meeting at local car shows. Then, she even helped me install the new seats in the Challenger. Neither of us was rushing into anything, but I recognized it immediately. This was what healthy looked like. Someone who showed up when they said they would, paid their own way, and didn't need drama to feel alive. Brooke found out. Somehow. And that's when things truly went off the rails. There's this indoor go-kart place called Velocity Track that Sam and I, and our friends, hit monthly. One Friday in late January, we were there for a friend's birthday when Brooke showed up. Uninvited. Clearly wildly drunk. She stormed into the lobby, screaming at the top of her lungs about how I had cheated and destroyed her life. She pointed a shaky finger at Natalie, calling her names I wouldn't repeat here, telling everyone that I'd been seeing someone behind her back, completely, audaciously rewriting history. Natalie just stood there, looking utterly bewildered, having only known me for a couple of weeks. I was about to step in and try to de-escalate when Brooke grabbed someone's racing helmet and hurled it at the wall, hard enough to crack the visor. That's when the manager called the cops. They issued a formal trespass warning, banning her permanently from the establishment. I added everything to the evidence Bible. My phone buzzed with even more frantic messages that night, but I just screenshotted them, then calmly went back to talking carburetors with Natalie. Brooke's life was spiraling somewhere out there, completely outside my concern now. The small claims court date finally arrived on a Tuesday morning in early March. One of those stark, gray late winter days where your breath still plumes in the air. I showed up 45 minutes early with Sam by my side, carrying a briefcase that looked like it belonged to a corporate lawyer, even though we were arguing over a measly $1,200. Brooke finally rolled in 10 minutes late, wearing a stiff job interview outfit, looking tired and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes. That makeup couldn't possibly hide. She carried only a purse and, crucially, zero documentation. As we were called in, she kept trying to catch my eye, as if some silent plea, some lingering connection, could somehow change the inevitable outcome. The judge was a woman probably in her 60s, with an expression that said she'd seen every single permutation of relationship drama imaginable, and had absolutely zero patience for nonsense. She started, directly, by asking Brooke if she had any evidence to dispute my claim that she owed money for shared expenses she'd expressly agreed to split. Brooke immediately launched into a rambling, tearful story about how the relationship was complicated and how I'd always made more money, so it wasn't fair to expect equal payment when I knew she was struggling. All of this, of course, completely ignored the fact that her struggles hadn't stopped her from getting weekly manicures or dining at expensive restaurants, living a lifestyle far beyond her means. The judge cut her off mid-sentence, a look of profound, almost bone-deep weariness etched on her face. She asked simply if Brooke had any bank statements, any text messages, any receipts, anything at all, showing she'd paid her share. And when Brooke, flustered, admitted she hadn't brought any proof because she didn't think she'd need documentation for what was obviously unfair, I watched the judge's expression visibly shift from neutral politeness to completely, utterly done. Her patience had officially run out. Then, Sam and I presented the evidence Bible. About 40 meticulously organized pages, complete with tabs, highlights, and a table of contents that, yes, was probably total overkill, but Sam just doesn't do anything halfway. The judge flipped through it for maybe 3 minutes, occasionally nodding, a quiet affirmation. Then she looked up, met Brooke's eye, and ruled. Brooke owed me $1,325, the original amount plus court fees, payable within 30 days, or subject to wage garnishment. Brooke's face went stark white. She started to stand up, to argue, to protest, but the judge, with a dismissive wave, simply said, "Next case." And just like that, it was over. 3 months of agonizing drama, resolved in 8 minutes of cold, hard court time. We walked out into the crisp, gray morning air. Sam did a little victory fist pump, a quiet, almost understated triumph. Me? I just felt profoundly tired. Ready to finally stop thinking about Brooke, ready to actually move forward with my life instead of merely surviving her relentless chaos. I genuinely thought that would be the end. I truly believed that losing in court, facing that public humiliation, would be the way-up call, the turning point that would make her realize she needed to move on. But apparently, for some people, humiliation isn't a stopping point. It's a catalyst. The next 3 weeks were eerily quiet. It felt ominous, like the unnerving calm before a storm you know is coming but can't quite see. She paid the judgment in 2 installments, just barely beating the deadline. Her social media went completely dark. Mutual friends whispered she'd moved back in with her parents. I actually started relaxing, letting myself believe, for a fleeting moment, that maybe this nightmare was finally, truly over. Natalie and I had been spending more and more time together, working on the Challenger seats I'd bought with some of the refund money. And for the first time in years, things felt genuinely good. Like I was finally building something real, tangible, and positive, instead of just surviving someone else's destructive chaos. Then came the night of March 20th. I remember the date specifically because it was the first genuinely warm evening of early spring. That magical night when winter's grip finally breaks. Natalie and I had decided to work late in my garage, door open to the fresh air, installing the new upholstery we'd spent weeks carefully picking out. It was around 10:30 p.m., and we were deep in debate about seat belt mount routing when I heard a car pull up outside. Way too fast. Tires screeching slightly. Before I could even process what was happening, Brooke stumbled into my garage. She was wearing pajama pants and an oversized jacket, clutching what was unmistakably a wine bottle. She was absolutely hammered, to the point she could barely walk straight. And immediately, she started screaming. At a volume that probably woke half my neighborhood. She went off, ranting about how I'd destroyed her entire life, turned her family against her, poisoned all her friends, made everyone think she was the bad guy, when all she'd done was fall in love with someone else. How Mark had blocked her, and his wife had threatened her with a restraining order, and she'd lost him because of me, somehow. How she'd even lost her apartment deposits because the landlord's background check had flagged the go-kart trespass. And somehow, in her utterly twisted mind, all of this staggering self-destruction was my fault. My fault for not being man enough to forgive her mistakes and fight for what we had. Natalie just stood there, socket wrench still in hand, looking utterly baffled, a deer in headlights. I, meanwhile, calmly pulled out my phone and dialed 911, explaining, in a steady voice, that my ex-fiancé had illegally entered my property, was clearly intoxicated, and I needed officers to respond immediately. Brooke just kept yelling, oblivious. Yelling about how she deserved better. How Natalie was just some cheap rebound who couldn't possibly compare to what we'd had. How I should have fought for our relationship instead of giving up so easily. She was completely, profoundly oblivious to the mind-numbing irony of it all, especially after she'd thrown a ring at me on Christmas and publicly announced her 8-month affair to her entire family. The cops arrived within 8 agonizing minutes, which felt like an eternity. All the while, Brooke continued to stumble haphazardly around my garage, getting dangerously close to the Challenger, my heart pounding with fear she'd damage it. The responding officers handled it with absolute, perfect professionalism. They asked Brooke to step outside in a tone that left zero room for argument. They performed a field sobriety test right there in my driveway, which, predictably, she failed spectacularly. They checked their system, immediately pulling up all the previous harassment reports, plus the go-kart trespass. Then, they arrested her. Criminal trespass, public intoxication, and violating conditions of her previous warning. She kept screaming my name as they put her in the patrol car, hands cuffed behind her back, ranting about how I'd regret this, how she'd never let me forget her, how I'd ruined both our lives, and a bunch of other slurred, incoherent nonsense that probably didn't help her case one bit. Then, the patrol car drove away, lights flashing silently into the night. The street got quiet again, save for the chirping crickets and the distant hum of highway traffic. Natalie looked at me, half concerned, half utterly bewildered, and asked, Does that happen often? I actually managed a small, weary smile. No, I told her, this was actually the grand finale. The final, spectacular meltdown I'd been halfway expecting for weeks. We went back inside, and as we